I try to commence by placing my humble pranams at the lotus feet of our beloved Bhagwan, and it is because of him that we are all together, right? That otherwise, at this time of the night, and for people in India, and I don't know what time it is in other parts of the world, but for you all to spare that time on a Sunday when you'd rather be out with your friends or someone else, we've all decided that no, we'll hang out together and we'll talk about Swami. We'll learn about what are his teachings, what does he say we should, what is the path that we should follow in our lives. So this is something that is very unique among Sai devotees, that we have decided for whatever reason that Bhagwan is the center of our life. For many other people, the centers of their life are, of course, themselves, and many other things take the place precedence. Like maybe the job takes precedence, earning money takes precedence, and for whatever reason, Bhagwan has entered our lives and said that no. So these things are pretty insignificant when you compare to earning the love of God or learning about His leelas and learning about His teachings. And that is really a sign of grace, because as is said in many of our scriptures, the yearning for the Lord, now that is a very very unique yearning that happens to maybe one in a million individuals. And perhaps our lives the way they are, it would never have intersected with spirituality, but somehow Bhagwan entered our lives. Like we did not originally know that he's pulling us on the path of spirituality, but then he enters our lives, makes us fall absolutely in love with him. And it is that love which slowly draws us to the path of spirituality. I recall one of my very close friends, and he used to stay in Bhagwan's residence. And he also had duty in Mandir. And he asked Bhagwan this question that, Swami, I don't know if I have faith in you. See, because faith is a very elevated spiritual devotional concept. And for some reason, he couldn't identify with that. He said, I'm a rational person by, I take, I question everything. And I'm an engineer by profession. So it is not my tendency to believe in everything just like that. I'm always cynical, always skeptical. So I don't know if I have faith in you, Bhagwan. This is what he told Swami in his sleeping quarters. Right? So Swami just asked him one question. He said, do you love me? Do you have love for me? He said, of course, Swami, I love you with all my heart. Swami said, that is enough. See, that is the only thing that Bhagwan asks from all of us. He does not ask for anything else. Not he doesn't want our money. He really doesn't want anything else from us except this one thing he demands from us, and that is our love for him. The once he has that, the rest he says, I'll take care. Whatever is needed at that time, I will take care of it. Because there are people who sometimes ask this question. They ask us, or they've asked Bhagwan also, like Swami, there are many types of spiritual practices. There is Raja Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. Which one should we take up? Right? And Swami himself gives the answer to this. That on the one hand, all these paths lead to God. There is nothing, at the very basic foundation level, all of these lead to God. But Swami says, who decides, who is that person, or who decides which path of yoga is a particular person will adopt? Who decides that? In fact, Swami himself gives the answer, it is I who decide which path a devotee takes. Many a time, if you look back now, say I look back at the last 20 years, I myself would have transitioned through at one point of time. I was so much in love with Advaita, and I and at that period of time, I remember what same it very coincidental, but Bhagwan also one after another his discourses were on Advaita. So it was a period when I was so much taken by it. But there was a period before that when bhakti meant everything to me. Then after that, it was a path of seva, like so those promptings are from inside. That's an inner prompting, and it is almost always a post-mortem analysis that, oh, okay, so this is the path that I have taken. So this is something that is left to Bhagwan. So all the only thing that we have to do, Bhagwan says, is have love for him. That is the only connection that he wants. Once that connection is established, Swami says that he will take care of the rest. And when we come to Bhagwan, actually, what is it that we all seek? There are many people, of course, they when we think of God, for many of us, he is like that coat hanger where we can hang all our worries, our anxieties, right? What will happen in the future to us, to our family members. So for many of us, God is like that. He's a person that we can leave our worries with him because he says, I'll take care of it. Don't exert yourself, worrying about what will happen. So he says, I'll take care of that. And for several others, he is that beacon of light, the promise of enlightenment. And why do we seek enlightenment? What is that? That there's a trigger, some point in our life which says that the path that I'm leading, the way I am going, somehow there is something lacking in it. There's no depth. We may have all the money with us, we may have loving family members, and everything that we need. A very good position at work, everything may be to our advantage, and still sometimes we feel that there is an emptiness. There's something that is lacking. And so Bhagwan would ask, he would be giving a discourse and he would point at the multitude of devotees in front. He says, they have come from various walks of life, they've come from rich backgrounds, poor backgrounds. Just look at them. He used to ask us, what do you think they have all come to me for? What is it that they lack that they come to me for? And we would talk about many things. We would say, Swami this, Swami that. So Swami would keep shaking his head, no, no, no. So ultimately, he says, there is something that they lack which I have. And what is that? And Swami himself would give the answer. They're all looking for peace. They're all looking for that peace, which is not available outside. And when they come to Bhagwan, in one way or the other, they are attaining that peace. And somehow life also seems to be designed that way. When I was, there is, so many pleasures are available in this world. But the dual side of it is that along with that pleasure, somewhere along the way, there is a sorrow attached to it. Like when I was small, I remember that there was this drink, all of you might remember if you had stayed in India, Gold Spot. So I used to absolutely love that drink when I was small. And I used to fantasize. So if people ask me, what is the job that you want to do? I would say, I want to work in the Gold Spot factory. Why? Because at will, I can, stretch my hand, I'll get Gold Spot, I can drink it to my heart's content. Right? I was so young, I didn't know about diabetes at that time. So now I know that if you indulge yourself in sweet, you will get at some point of time your body is going to react. So you see this everywhere. God has planted in this universe a dual, like there is pleasure, and attached to it there is a pain. And this is what Lord Buddha he recognized. He said the nature of this world is sorrow. He says, and there is a reason for that. Otherwise, we would have been completely lost. If the design of the world is such that it is only for pleasure, then why are these pain points being planted at various places? That is because that is to remind us that we are something other than pleasure seeking humans, pleasure seeking animals. That there is something that we need to look for. What is it? Something is always left undefined. We don't know what it is. There is a something, there is an it. And that it embodies itself from time to time in human form to remind us in which direction we are going. And out of his immense grace, Bhagwan, Lord descended into the form of our Bhagwan Sri Satyasai Baba. And he made it so very easy, like the absolute love. Bhagwan, as he often said, his best description is love walking on 2 feet. Like I know of a devotee from New Delhi. I had met him 4 years back at his home, very very close to Bhagwan. Like every Sunday from Delhi he would fly down to Puttaparthi, and numerous interviews, interactions with Bhagwan here, Kodaikanal, etc. I was very curious, sir, how did you come to Bhagwan? So he was associated with the very first super specialty hospital at the time of its construction. He was in charge of delivering the medical equipment, a lot of the cardiac equipment. He was in charge of that, and he was a complete atheist. There was no place for God at all in his life. All his life, he had grown up in such a way that he never felt the necessity of God in his life. The only thing he knew was, I have to work with integrity and hard work. They were his only values. And so the person who was at that time overall looking at the construction of the hospital, he said that you should come down to meet Bhagwan, and he resisted it. Then there was another doctor, Dr. Venugopal, who was with the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and he kept, he would be relentless. He would say, no, you should not be working in this project until and unless you had darshan of Bhagwan. So he says, see, this is a very well-known, respected doctor, and due to him, I have developed many business contacts. So I could not say no to him. So he said, just to please him, I decided that I'll come down to Whitefield and see who this Bhagwan is. So he comes down, and he has absolutely no inkling of what is a procedure. How do where do you sit for darshan? Nothing. He walked in right in front of Bhagwan's residence in Brindavan. And no Sevadar, nobody stopped him. To date, he has no explanation why he was not stopped at any of the three gates before he entered up to Bhagwan's residence. He comes, stands right in front of the door. And luckily, the person who was in charge of the construction of the hospital, he recognized him. He said, very good, come, stand right here. And he still has no clue what is happening. He says, I may have seen his photo once or twice, right? Bhagwan's photo. That's the only introduction he has had to Bhagwan. So he's standing there in front of the door. And at around 6:45, which was the usual darshan time then, the doors of Trai Brindavan, they flew open, and Swami comes out in his orange robe. He says, the moment I saw him, I knew that this was God. That was it. It just took a second. He just sees, and tears start flowing out of his eyes, because we don't know, for births, after births, this is a soul that has yearned, and Bhagwan knew this was the right time to show himself to him. All it took was that 1 second, and tears started flowing out of him. He says, I don't know, Hari, I have no explanation for this, but I just saw him. I knew this was God, coming from an atheist, that this is God himself. Because he could see that is a kind of love that is radiating from Bhagwan. For many people, this is the same experience. People go into I used to watch people go into the interview room and come out crying, crying, crying. The tears are flowing out of their eyes, because they've been in the presence of something that is very, very unique, total, unconditional, boundless love from someone you think you have not known all your life. But when you sit in front of Bhagwan, for him, you are a person whom he has known from centuries or millennia. So for him, it is a very, very close bond that he has with you. So he speaks to you as if he's known you always. And that is the experience that, which breaks down even the toughest of hearts. So I've seen people just come out crying. Why? Because of that boundless love. There is absolutely no description. I have not seen anybody love the way Bhagwan has. I can, even now there are some of these scenes that come to my mind. Again, this was the lawns of Trai Brindavan. This may look like a very silly experience. I'll actually need you to fully immerse yourself, put yourself where I am standing and look at the scene that is developing, right? So this is the lawns of Trai Vrindavan early in the morning, and Swami is coming down a ramp from his residence. A small ramp is there, and as we are all standing in front of Bhagwan's residence, Swami is waving one small photo in his hand. He's looking very excited. There's a photo in Swami's hand, and he's looking at it and he's looking around. And he calls one of us. He says, "See this photo." And in this photo, the Swami is there with another student. And Swami wants to know, where is this boy? He says, "Where is this boy?" So that excitement on Swami's face, and then that boy comes running, and Swami shows him that photo. See, we both are there in the same photo. That excitement, that feeling, and that boy is actually stupefied because he is looking at the avatar himself, the Lord himself is so excited that he's got a photo with him. So he says, "Look, we are in the same photo." Can you imagine that? the the stories that, like, I have heard over the years of the interactions that some of the students have had with Bhagwan, there's only one emotion that comes to mind, that is pure jealousy. I mean, like, how what did they do, to experience that kind of love? I've seen one photograph of one very close friend of mine taken in the interview room with Bhagwan. He is standing right next to Swami, and you'll not believe Swami's hands are around him. He's holding him close like this, with his hands around his shoulder. He's holding him close to him in that photograph. And I asked that, can you please tell me what is it that you did in your past lives that you could get this kind of proximity to Swami? Please tell me. I'm ready to do it right now. If I have to do it in spades, I'll do it, but I want that. So that I have witnessed with my own eyes, and perhaps many of you have experienced that, that kind of love which is not available anywhere. And it is with this love, he'll attract us like moth to the light or bees to honey. He's calling each one of us, and Swami says, "What is it that you're all coming to him for?" And he says, "There is only one thing that I have to give, and that is peace." That is what everybody is seeking. There is, at the heart of all our spiritual practices, is this, that there's this continuous conversation that is going on in our mind. Some have it in high degree and some to a low degree, but whatever it is, so for whatever it is in our day-to-day lives, we experience a lot of turbulence, and we are looking for a way out of that turbulence. To Is there a way to still that mind? And for that we adopt like various practices. And because what we see in our daily lives is absolutely this, that we want an end to all the anxieties, worries, and all the turbulence that is there in our minds. Like in the Zen philosophy, they say that ultimately what is a Zen monk looking for is like a mind like honey. So the mind should ultimately be like honey. So whatever, uh, if you have a cup of honey and you tap it, right? So you will see that the honey will just maybe once or twice, it will go this way, that way, but finally it will settle down within a few minutes. The same thing with water. It takes a very long time for the water to settle down. But honey, it just maybe it disturbed for a few seconds and then it's back. And say that is what the kind of mind that we should all be aspiring for, is a mind like honey. And for this, of course, for most of us, Bhagwan is the person that, as I said, to whom we can peg all our worries. I was just mentioning to Mr. Chandrasekhar a few minutes back that I was having dinner with one of my classmates just before I came. And I was recalling one experience that happened with him. See, there was a period when, for whatever reason, Bhagwan was not speaking to any of the students. He would come for darshan and not speak to anybody, and straight he would go off to the interview room. So this went on for weeks and weeks and weeks, and finally the registrar of the university, he intervened with Bhagwan, saying that the students are missing you a lot. So Swami comes out and sits, and he's still looking very distant, as if completely disinterested in all the students who are sitting in front of him. And then Bhagwan, he had this habit that suddenly he would pick people, students from who were sitting in front of him, and would say, "Come, give a talk. Just speak." Totally, impromptu, unprepared, no script, nothing. Just come and speak. So, like this, he beckoned to one of my friends, one of my classmates. So the that brother, he comes and he starts speaking in front of Bhagwan, and for whatever reason, he chose to speak about how important it is for students to hand over their letters to Bhagwan, how precious that is. So he went through it like in such a detailed manner, almost step by step, as to how we begin writing that letter to Bhagwan, how we put it in a cover. So he was speaking about that, and then the thrill of handing it to Bhagwan, or the disappointment of him not taking those letters. So he went through it in great detail, and we could see, literally emotion stirring inside Swami. So that he just gave a short 5 minute talk on this, and he went to his place. But the moment his talk ended, Swami got up and he started walking around the entire block, student by student. Whoever had letters, Swami would stretch and pick up those letters, because that outpouring of anguish that student, in all of 5 minutes that he let out, it was as if reminding the Lord, we need you. You can't abandon us. There are so many things that are buffeting us. How do you think you can sit silent and just watch? And you could see the Lord immediately respond. You read in mythologies, the Bhagavatam, Mahabharata, Ramayana, they tell you that the Lord's heart is soft like butter. You make a prayer and the Lord will immediately respond. We could literally see it in front of our eyes. Swami had decided that he would sit stone faced, not responding to anybody's pleadings. But all it took was this one 5 minute outpouring of how much a letter means. Because that, even when a statue was made of Bhagwan, one of the features in that was Swami holding letters. If there's like one memory for all of us which would stand of Swami, it would invariably have Bhagwan holding a bunch of letters in his hand. If any video you watch of Bhagwan, even from the 1950s, that is the first most prominent thing you'll notice is during Darshan Swami picking letters from everybody. And this is how, Bhagwan is always standing there. He's there for his devotees. In fact, when Bhagwan built the hospital, he insisted that it should have a huge dome area. Now, if you look at a normal hospital, they try to earn revenue from every inch. So if some outside hospital consultant, they come and view our hospital, they'll be saying, "What is all this empty space? What are you doing with it?" But Bhagwan insisted. He said, "No." He said that half the treatment actually happens in that dome area. Many of you would have seen our hospitals. Both the hospitals feature a huge dome area. It's like a meditation hall, and a person of any religion, any domination can go and pray over there. So Bhagwan insisted that that should be present. He said because half the cure is removed when the worries of the patient have been removed. And where will they place their worries except at the Lord's lotus feet? And because this is exactly like what we do, when we are in the presence of worries for all Sai devotees, this is what we say. Swami himself says, like that, you need not trouble yourself. Rest them all at my lotus feet. In fact, I remember one interaction that Swami had with Professor Anil Kumar. This would happen almost every day, that Swami would come sit outside for some 40 minutes, and he would spend a lot of time interacting with students and also with Professor Anil Kumar, because those interactions would be punctuated with a lot of humor and also a lot of wisdom. Like only he knew exactly, what were the boundaries, like how you could tickle Swami if you had to, or if Swami was in a mood where he wanted to talk about something profound, he would also join in with that. But sometimes what would happen is this would be a very interesting scene. They would just keep looking at each other. Swami would look at Anil Kumar sir. Anil Kumar sir would look at Swami. For almost close to a minute, they would just be looking at each other in complete silence. And one day, Swami, they both were looking like this. Swami said Anil Kumar, why are you looking at me like this? He says, Swami, I am very happy, Swami, looking at you. The Swami said, oh, you're happy, is it? Okay, I'll send a few worries your way. And oh my God, we were all like, oh, this is a very hilarious moment. You have the creator of the universe, the person who holds our destinies in his hands, and he's telling somebody, oh, you're happy, is it? I will send some worries across. Actually, we all know that this is the secret. This is what he does with everybody, but it was being let out at that moment. So it was so wondrous to watch how Anil Kumar sir, how he parried that. So he told Swami, Swami, I have lived now 75 years. I have had so many worries. Still, why do you want to burden me with this? Leave me happy. So nicely he told Bhagwan. Bhagwan started laughing. He said, okay, I'll keep you peaceful. It is just a small little reminder that that we were in the presence of somebody, in whose hand we are only puppets, and it is whatever happens with us is completely in his hands, right? But Bhagwan himself would often, he would remind us that while we all would like to avoid suffering, but suffering is a spiritual catalyst. In fact, like no other, because if we look at the life of Gautam Buddha, uh, that he was born into a life of absolute luxury. He had nothing lacking. And in fact, he was shielded from viewing anything that would cause distress. But somehow, as fate would have it, he had three experiences of looking at events that caused, which told him that the essential nature of life is sorrow. And this is what started his inquiry into what is dukkha, what is sorrow. That is what led him finally onto the path of enlightenment. And this is what Bhagwan does, So he uses that period of suffering as a catalyst to have us grow. Like I could almost see that progression in my own mother's life, because first when I joined for my MBA at Bhagwan's college, uppermost in my mind was that my mother should get cured of her rheumatoid arthritis. So I would try to give Swami numerous letters. Each time he would not take the letter at all. So at one point of time, I started weeping in my room, saying that what is this, Swami? We have tried all doctors. There's nobody else who can cure my mother or at least ease her suffering. And I'm not even having access to give a letter to Bhagwan. As it happened, a few days later, there was suddenly Swami called me, started speaking to me about something, and I decided this is the best time for me to bring up that my mother's health needs some intervention from you, Bhagwan. So all I said in my native language, Kannada, all I said to Swami was that Swami, my mother is not keeping well. That is all I said. And Swami immediately responded in again my language. Uh, Swami started saying that yes, I know. He said first the doctors they treated her for rheumatism, isn't it? I said yes, Swami. Later they said it is arthritis. I said yes, Swami. And finally they said it is rheumatoid arthritis. I said yes, Swami. And then it struck me that all those years of suffering when we thought that Bhagwan was not with us, he was literally standing beside us, watching everything that was happening. He was giving us a blow by blow account of what had been happening for the past several years. And he came down to this. So I'll just show my hand, So he held his wrist and he said, in suddenly in Hindi he switched, he said, Idhar dard hota hai na. So I said, huh, Swami, because that one thing it struck me very hard because when my mother was going through all that pain and I was actually studying engineering at Chennai at Madras. So when my semester holidays would happen, I would come home. The very first thing I would do was hold up my mother's hand and press it at the wrist just to check how much pain she is experiencing. And Swami was recreating that exactly. It's as if, he was present always right there next to me, next to all of us. Like so he was just telling me, yes, I know what is happening. Now you see how the human mind works, right? I'm standing in front of the Lord of the universe, and I was looking aghast at him. See how much ever you read of Satyam Shivam Sundaram, here everybody's experiences. At that moment, when you're confronted with the Lord's omnipresence and omnipotence, the human mind is still it is unable to take it. So the first words that came out of my mouth were like, Swami, you know everything. It was like a question mark. You know everything? Like, and the way, Swami, he raised his hand and almost gave me a high five, like how you would do it teenagers, right? So he gave me a high five and he said, yes, I know everything. And then he said, see, don't worry about your mother's health. I'll call you after a few days and then I will talk to her. So he called her 2 weeks later for an interview. And he told her, you stop, taking any medicine, don't take any of the pills that have been prescribed. Just take this vibhuti. And he materialized some vibhuti for her and also took a few packets from a cover that was lying next to him, gave it to her and said, every day mix a little bit of this with water. Of course, over the years, as she took the vibhuti, her health improved so much that once what happened is Bhagwan had gone to Kodaikanal and Swami also, my mother also decided that she would have darshan of Swami in Kodaikanal. So one of the students who was very lucky to accompany Bhagwan, when he came back, he told me that once Swami had set out in his car, and all the students were also there. They accompanied him in a bus behind, and he said, "I witnessed a very astonishing sight. I saw your mother actually running behind Swami's car. At the time when Swami called us, she was practically bedridden. 5 years later, she was running behind Swami's car to have his darshan." So that was an absolute miracle that I witnessed in front of my eyes. That a person who could hardly walk, who could hardly get out of bed, a few years later, she was just absolutely walking very close to normal. And as I said, like running behind Swami's car. Right? So this was his support. Like he said that okay, you've gone through so much worries, whatever it is, I'll take them away. So how will I take them away? I'll give you these vibhuti packets. You can use them as medicine. Now, what happened a few months down the line was that those packets of vibhuti now they got over, and my mother's feet they started swelling. Now, this happened at a very unfortunate point of time in my life because for whatever reason, Swami had stopped interacting with me. He would completely avoid me. Whatever letters I would, try to give him, he would not take. He would not look in my direction. And on one hand, this is happening. On the other hand, my mother is pleading. She's saying, "See, my legs are all swollen. The pain is returning. I have to get vibhuti from Swami." So then what do I do? So I decided, okay, now there's nothing I can do about this except pray to Bhagwan. I wrote a letter to Swami saying that Swami, today I'll be sitting in the front line for darshan. I want you to talk to me about my mother's health. That's all, 2 lines. And I sent the letter in the morning. So then afternoon during darshan, I'm sitting in front and Swami, I can see that, that for whatever reason he's upset with me. He doesn't want to look at me at all. He's turning, talking to people all around. Finally, it like, okay, I give up. Swami said, looked at me and he said, okay, tell me what is wrong with your mother. So I told Swami the mother's left leg is swelling. He said, why? So in that same, very bored tone, okay, why is it swelling? I said, Swami, the packets of vibhuti that you gave her, they have got over. Now, in my mind, the expectation is that, oh, Swami will say, oh, my poor boy, okay, I will, go into interview room, get the vibhuti or materialize something. Swami only asked me, that same bored tone of voice, he asked me, what about the vibhuti packets I gave you? So he knew perfectly well and not even touched them after that, I'd taken them, deposited them in my cupboard and not touched. He said, go and give those to mother here, anyway, not going to use them. So that's all those expectations that I had that Swami's love towards me would get rekindled and all that. He just said, no, what I've given you before, use that. So I gave it to my mother, but at that moment, the immediate experience was that why aren't you helping me? Earlier, when I reached out to help, he immediately held my hand. Right? You held me, you comforted me, and you said, I'll take care of everything. Right? And now you're giving me an entirely different message. But when I analyzed it, the message that I received from Swami is that I have given you whatever you need. Make use of that. You see, whenever a bird, you have a fledgling bird, a newborn bird. For the first several days, it is the mother that will go out into the wild and get the food and drop it into the baby bird's mouth. But there comes a time in that baby bird's life when the mother decides it's time to kick the bird out of the nest. And so it kicks the bird out of the nest, and the nest is at a height, and that the baby bird, it starts falling. I can imagine what must be going through that to the mind of that bird. That, oh mother, you were my everything. I used to look up to you for everything, and now you kick me straight out. I can't hold on to you. I can't rely on you. And it just keeps going as it falls. The mother is still watching what is happening, and the bird is seeing that the mother is not interfering at all. At some point of time, the bird discovers that it also has wings. That all this time, what the mother bird was nurturing was the strength in those wings. The wings are always there. The mother bird was strengthening those wings, and it suddenly it discovers that it has the ability to flap and fly on its own. And that is the lesson which Bhagwan always gives us. He says that, look, I have given you everything that you need in order to lead a very peaceful life. And what is that everything? Apart from the many discourses that he gives us, there are the lessons that he has passed on. Very specific lessons, right? And for example, he would say that one of the things that Yudhishthira, he would keep telling his brothers, is that this too shall pass. Whatever happens, this too shall pass. He used to say that you can use that like a mantra. Whatever comes your way, he says, like, worries are like clouds or troubles are like clouds. They'll come, they'll go. And another very powerful conversation that Swami would introduce, he would say that, whatever happens is for my good. There's this very nice story somebody told me of a farmer in a particular village. So he had only like one horse with him and for that entire farm. One day it so happened that his horse it disappeared. So one day he wakes up, he says there's no horse in his stable. Unlucky, the one horse that we had it running. He would say, unlucky, let's see. So then after a few days, that same horse it returns back to the stable. Other horses came along with that horse back. So now, when he earlier where he had one horse, now he has three horses. So now all the friends they come to him, oh, you're so lucky, you're so lucky. Now you got three horses. He says, lucky, let's see. Then again, after a few days, his younger son he decides that he wants to try out one of these new horses. So he gets onto them and starts riding. And when he rides, he has a fall, and he has a very bad fracture. So again, all the friends they come to him. Oh, you're so unlucky. Your kid had a fall, broke his leg. He says, let's see, let's see. So after a few days, that kingdom it goes to war. So they're conscripting all the youngsters into the uh, army. So all the youngsters in that particular village, they're all called to war, but this kid is left out. Why? Because he has a fracture. He cannot serve in the army. So this time, all the youngsters have to go. All those farmers were to let their sons go to war. They come to him. They say, "You're so lucky." He still says, "Let's see, let's see." So this very beautiful story, this says that at every point of time, the only conversation that is true is whatever happens is for my good. This is the faith that we should have in Bhagwan. Like somebody said, like if you go water rafting, so those who have done this rapid water or white water rafting. So what happens is at many a time you get thrown into the water. The boat overturns and you're thrown into the water. The advice they give at that moment is like don't resist. Just don't flap around, don't do anything. Just hold still. The water will take you safely to wherever it has to take you. because the people who resist, those are the people who get inserted into the rocks. There is a certain flow of the water, which is the water itself is trying to go past the rocks. If you resist it, you end up in the rock. So this is the trainers say that, like, don't resist the water. And this is what Bhagavan says, that whatever is happening is for your good. So stick on. Just don't set aside all your opinions, judgments, because that's who we are. Essentially, the only thing that comes between our experience of life and what is in our minds is just this: our judgment, our evaluation of what is going on. We are trained, our mind is somehow trained to think there's something is going wrong here, something is going wrong here. If you notice, that is the immediate evaluation. When something happens, at that moment you say, hey, there's something wrong here. And that is our judgment, our evaluation of about that incident at that moment. So Bhagavan is saying, set aside that opinion and replace it with whatever is happening is for my good. Whatever happens is for my good. Your opinions, your judgment about that is immaterial. So someone said, for us, if you notice in our daily lives, our opinions, our judgments, they matter a lot to us. They're very, very significant. Very significant. So there's a very nice prescription they give for those who think their opinion is so important. They say, on a starry night, a cloudless starry night, go stand, look at the sky, right? And there are so many stars. And go and tell those stars your opinion about life, your opinion about what India is like, your opinion about what the roads are like, your opinion about what your parents are like, what you think of your kids, what you think of your colleagues. Go tell the stars, broadcast your opinion to the stars, and then watch for that complete indifference with which the universe is listening to you. Absolute silent indifference. The world cares two hoots for your opinion. If that doesn't wake us up to how insignificant actually our judgment of any situation is, nothing else will. So Bhagavan says, your opinion, your judgment is immaterial in that moment. All that you have to supplant that particular train of thought is with this, that whatever happens is for my good. In fact, Bhagavan, now that may sound like a very, passive way of dealing with it. Bhagavan would take it to the next level. There are times when people have said to Swami, my husband passed away, my wife passed away, or my business ended up in a loss. Bhagwan's response would be Chala Santosham, very happy. Very happy, Swami would say. It's as if he has not even heard what that person has said. The Swami would say, no, I've heard what he said. But very happy, Chala Santosham. So it's not just passive acceptance. It's an actual active choice called this is good. Chala Santosham, very, very good, right? Because at that moment, you can see what's next for us. That's what Bhagavan is very, very powerfully. He was putting us in a position of power, no matter what kind of worries, etc., buffet us. So this is what, in my experience, this is what Bhagavan was teaching us at that moment. That whatever is needed, I have given you. Now it is for you to go and put it in practice out there in the world. Because a lot of times people would come to me after Swami's Aradhana. They would say that, don't you miss Swami, or when is Bhagavan coming back? That was the biggest question, that, when is Bhagavan coming back? So I said, I do not know when he's going to come back. No, that is not in my hands. Right? I said, to me, this situation is like this. I said, sometimes a teacher is teaching in the classroom and they want to leave the classroom for whatever reason. So they give some assignment to the students. They say, while I'm away, I want you to practice, whatever I have taught you in the last few days. And the teacher says, when I come back, I want to see that the assignment is completely done. And I said, that is what I have to worry about. I have to not worry about when is Bhagavan coming back. I have to worry about the assignment in front of me. Am I doing it or not? What the teacher has taught me the last many days. Now, am I applying that or not? That is what the teacher wants me to do. Because when the teacher comes back, that is what he or she is going to look for, and that is what Bhagwan is looking for. He has given us whatever we need. It is for us to apply it, because whenever we are again in His presence, in whatever form, when we are again in His presence, that is what He is going to ask each one of us. Have you done the homework? Have you done your assignment or not? So this is something that we should pay a lot of attention, and I'm sure that in these satsangs, that is precisely what all of us are actively trying to do. We are like asking each other question. Okay, so what did Bhagwan say in this situation? What is Bhagwan's teaching in this situation? So that that very moment onwards, that is now put into practice right there and then. And we need those reminders. We're all human. And for me, that's one of the things with these satsangs is that like I tend to forget what Bhagwan has said to us, to me, to my friends, or in discourses. And even although I'm working here, I could, be lost in the everyday work and everyday interactions. It is like satsangs like this, which is when my mind starts churning. Okay, so, and each time, believe me, I may have spoken about this same thing. Each time I'll be looking at it in a completely new light. And like how I've applied it, it starts working the moment somebody says, this is the time and place where you have to give your speech. And from that moment, it starts churning like, am I actually practicing those things? To what extent? So that's a beautiful reminder, a beautiful practice for me. And I'd really like to thank all of you for this, for the opportunity of not just, speaking to all of you. You've been such fantastic listeners that it gives a lot of satisfaction to see that reaction, and that people are listening. It's a very empowering thing for me to experience on the other side. But also the very fact that that the moment it is told to me that there is a talk, at that moment I begin to correct the various parts of my life that are out of balance. That it's a responsibility that I have. I cannot just come and speak whatever is in my mind. Like it has to be in practice. Before that, I have to have some things in place. So that is always a reminder for me, and for that I am very grateful to each one of you for this opportunity. I also would like to offer once again my obeisances at Bhagwan's lotus feet for granting all the grace that he has granted to me, as he has treated me as his own child, and I cannot ask for anything greater than that. With that, I would like to conclude with a prayer. Uh, Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.